Secret Wars 2 and Secret Wars 3. The original Secret Wars was actually created for a very specific reason, and that's selling toys. And somehow, it turned into one of Marvel's most iconic events. You had heroes and villains thrown onto Battleworld by the Beyonder, forced to fight with real consequences, like Spider-Man getting the black suit that turned out to be the Venom symbiote. It was simple, chaotic, and complete. That's the key part. It told a full story with a clear ending. There wasn't some huge loose thread begging for a sequel, but because it sold insanely well, Marvel saw it as a successful formula. So Marvel followed it up with Secret Wars 2, and instead of repeating what worked, they went in a completely different direction. This time, the Beyonder comes to Earth to understand humanity, and that's where things get messy. The story isn't about a central conflict anymore. It's about the Beyonder wandering around, interacting with different characters, and trying to feel human. The tone shifts constantly, the pacing is weird, and it feels like a bunch of random encounters stitched together. It's bigger in scope, but somehow less engaging. And it invaded every Marvel comic at the time. It spread across tons of issues and series. Characters had nothing to do with the main plot, suddenly had to deal with the Beyonder showing up in their stories. If you weren't following everything, you were missing pieces. And even if you were following everything, it didn't always feel worth it. It's one of the earliest examples of Marvel realizing they could turn an event into a line-wide marketing push. But it came at the cost of storytelling quality. Then there's Secret Wars 3, not as influential and remembered as the original Secret Wars, not as despised as Secret Wars 2, more forgotten than 2004's Secret War, and a vastly inferior sequel when compared to 2015's Secret Wars. Anyway, the Beyonder isn't actually dead. His energy forms an entirely new universe, which the Fantastic Four end up exploring. Along the way, you get a chaotic mix of characters like Doctor Doom, who unsurprisingly is still obsessed with gaining godlike powers, and Molecule Man, who's now way more powerful than before. The story introduces beings like the Shaper of Worlds and Cubic, and tying everything back to the origin of cosmic cubes. It even tries to connect the Beyonder to this larger cosmic system, turning what was once an all-powerful, mysterious entity into something much more explainable, and honestly, much less impressive. By the end, the story leans heavily into retcons. The Beyonder is revealed to basically be an incomplete cosmic cube, and the whole conflict ends with him merging with Molecule Man to create a new cube, effectively erasing him as a character. Meanwhile, the Fantastic Four barely do anything. Doom's motivations make questionable sense, and the entire journey feels kind of pointless, since nothing major is accomplished. The only real lasting consequence is the creation of a new cosmic cube entity, later known as Cosmos/Maker, while the Beyonder himself disappears from relevance. Ironically, the only part of this storyline that truly matters long term is the introduction of the Beyonders, who would later play a huge role in the much important 2015 Secret Wars, which is not an unnecessary sequel, by the way. Yeah, it shares the same name, yeah, it brings back Battleworld, but this one isn't just a sequel cash-in. It's actually one of Marvel's most important modern events. It basically acted as a soft reboot for the entire universe, collapsing the multiverse and rebuilding it into a new status quo that shaped everything that came after, from new character directions to merged realities and fresh starting points for readers. So while the older Secret Wars sequels feel unnecessary, the 2015 one is the opposite. It had a real purpose and long-term impact. Fall of the Hulks and World War Hulks. After World War Hulk became a massive hit, with Hulk returning to Earth, smashing everyone, and feeling like an unstoppable force, Marvel clearly wanted to revisit that same energy. So instead of letting that story stand on its own, they built a whole new arc with Fall of the Hulks, leading into World War Hulks. The idea sounded logical: expand the Hulk mythos, raise the stakes, bring in more gamma-powered characters. The difference is, the original had a clear emotional core and motivation, with Hulk getting revenge on the Illuminati. This one is way more scattered. Fall of the Hulks tries to raise the stakes by introducing the Intelligentsia, a group of genius-level villains like the Leader, MODOK, Matt Thinker, and others, who literally study every battle in Marvel history to create the perfect plan to take down the Hulks. At the same time, Bruce Banner is temporarily powerless and forced to rely on his intelligence instead of brute strength, while training his son Sakaar for what's coming. Meanwhile, the Red Hulk becomes a central figure, operating in the shadows with his own agenda. You've also got tension between all Gamma characters like Sakaar, She-Hulk, A-Bomb, showing a fractured Hulk family. There are just too many moving parts, multiple ideas happening at once, all trying to set up something bigger. Then World War Hulks come in and go into full chaos mode. The Intelligentsia captures Banner and uses a device to turn a bunch of heroes and villains, including heavy hitters like Spider-Man, Wolverine, and even Captain America, into Hulk-powered versions of themselves. So now, instead of one Hulk-level threat, you've got an entire army of Hulks. Hulk works best as a this singular force of destruction. When everyone becomes Hulk-like, the concept stops feeling unique. It becomes less Hulk is unstoppable and more everyone is just smashing everything. But one of the major payoffs of this storyline is finally revealing the identity of Red Hulk, and that's General Ross. It's actually a big moment and it had been built up for a while. There are also other dramatic elements like Banner's capture, Doc Samson's betrayal, and the tension between Hulk and his son Sakaar. These are all strong ideas individually, but because the story is so overloaded with action, transformations, and multiple plotlines, these moments don't land as powerfully as they should. At the end of the day, these two storylines feel like a sequel that tries to go bigger in every way. More Hulks, more villains, more chaos, but forgets what made the original concept work. World War Hulk was simple and focused, one angry Hulk versus the world. This storyline turns that into a complicated web of plans, betrayals, and mass transformations. It has cool ideas and moments, but it feels unnecessary because it overcomplicates something that was already perfect in its simpler form. The Marvel Zombies sequels. Robert Kirkman's Marvel Zombies came out of nowhere and instantly worked. It was shocking, brutal, and honestly kinda genius. Seeing Marvel characters turned into cannibalistic monsters was something fans had never really seen before. It felt fresh, edgy, and most importantly, self-contained. But because it sold so well, Marvel treated it like a goldmine, and that's where the problem starts. They kept going and going and going. With Marvel Zombies 2, the core concept is basically the same. The zombie heroes are still around, still dangerous, still consuming everything, but the shock factor is already gone. You've already seen Spider-Man eat people, you've already seen the Avengers as monsters. The sequel tries to expand the story and push things further, but it doesn't hit the same because the originality is gone. It's like watching a horror movie sequel where you already know all the tricks. It's not that it's terrible, it's that it doesn't need to exist. And then Marvel really leans into it with Marvel Zombies 3, 4, 5. At this point, it stops being a story. New setting, same zombies. New twist, same outcome. The series just keep recycling it in different ways. Sometimes they try to mix things up with new characters or dimensions, but the core concept never really changes. And that's the issue. The more they repeat it, the less special it becomes. What was once disturbing and unique turns into something predictable. And one of the biggest problems with all of these sequels is that they start explaining too much. The original worked partly because it was mysterious. You didn't need to know every detail about the virus or how everything worked, but the more sequels you add, the more you try to justify and expand the concept. Suddenly, there are rules, variations, explanations, and all of that takes away from the horror, because to me personally, horror thrives on the unknown. Once you fully understand it, it stops being interesting. Marvel Zombies didn't need to be a franchise. The first story already did everything it needed to do. It shocked fans, told a complete narrative, and left a lasting impression. The sequels exist because the concept was popular, not because the story needed to continue. And you can actually feel that with each new installment. Spider-Geddon. Spider-Verse was huge. Tons of spider people, multiverse chaos, and the Inheritors as a fresh threat. It felt massive, creative, and honestly like a once-in-a-lifetime crossover. So of course, Marvel brought it back with Spider-Geddon. The Inheritors return, the Spider Army reforms, and it's once again a multiversal war. The problem isn't that it's bad. It's once again familiarity. It just repeats the same core idea because it worked the first time. In Spider-Geddon, the Inheritors come back thanks to cloning technology, and once again, they are hunting spider totems across the multiverse. So what do the heroes do? Exactly what they did before. Gather spider people from different worlds and fight back. You've got Miles Morales, Peter Parker, Spider-Gwen, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, and even Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Punk, and Penny Parker. And the scale is still big, but structurally, it's the same story. Assemble the team, stop the Inheritors, save the multiverse. Spider-Geddon tries to go even bigger by adding more spider variants, more teams, and more parallel storylines. You've got different groups with different ideologies. Some want to kill the Inheritors, others want to find another solution. Or Octavius plays a major role here, pushing for a more ruthless approach, which is actually one of the more interesting parts of the story. But because there are so many characters, the emotional focus gets weaker. There's just too much happening at once. To be fair, Spider-Geddon still has some really cool ideas. The final plan to defeat the Inheritors, turning them into harmless versions of themselves instead of killing them, is actually a smart twist. list. There are fun character interactions and some creative spider variants that stand out. But the problem is that none of it feels as original as the first time. The novelty of seeing multiple spider people has already worn off. The original Spider-Verse already delivered the ultimate multiverse Spider-Man experience. It brought together all these characters, introduced the inheritors, and told a complete story. Spider-Geddon doesn't really expand that idea, it just revisits it. And that's what makes it fit perfectly on this list. Not a bad event though. Civil War 2. Civil War was something special. It was a real civil war with both sides kinda making sense. So years later, Marvel decided to bring it back with Civil War 2. But instead of feeling like a natural continuation, it immediately feels like Marvel trying to recreate that same success. Same name, same idea of heroes fighting each other, same choose side marketing, but without that organic build-up. Civil War 2 is built around a new Inhuman named Ulysses, who can predict the future. One side, led by Captain Marvel, believes they should act on those predictions to stop crimes before they happen, while the other side, led by Iron Man, believes that's dangerous and unfair. On paper, it sounds like a cool moral dilemma, but in execution, it's way weaker than the original. Predicting the future just doesn't hit the same as real-world issues, like government control and personal freedom. It feels more abstract, less relatable, and honestly, less convincing. You don't get that same both sides are right feeling. And one of the biggest reasons the original Civil War worked is because the characters felt mostly true to themselves, even when they made questionable choices. In Civil War 2, a lot of characters feel off. Captain Marvel especially becomes way more aggressive and controlling than expected, while Iron Man swings hard in the opposite direction. Characters were being pushed into roles just to make the conflict happen, and when that happens, this story loses authenticity. You're not watching a real ideological war anymore. You're basically watching a setup. The sequel tries to raise the stakes with shocking moments, major fights, surprising outcomes, even character deaths, but the problem is, they don't land. In the original, every big moment felt like it mattered and had weight behind it. Here, a lot of those moments feel like attempts to recreate that shock value. You can almost see the formula. We need a big moment here, something tragic there, but without the strong foundation. Those moments feel forced. Yeah, the comic doesn't really add anything to the legacy of Civil War. It doesn't deepen the original themes, it doesn't evolve the idea in a powerful way, and it doesn't leave the same lasting impact. It just revisits the concept of heroes fighting each other, because that concept worked before. I mean, it's not a surprise that it is one of the most hated comic books ever, and some might think it single-handedly ruined the character of Carol Danvers forever. The Deadpool Kills sequels. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe worked because it felt insane and unexpected. Deadpool suddenly becomes hyper-aware, breaks reality, and just starts wiping out the entire Marvel Universe. It was honestly kinda shocking to see heroes treated like that, but the key reason it worked is because it felt like a one-off concept, something wild you do once and never touch again. The moment Marvel decided to turn it into a series of sequels, the entire idea already started losing its value, because once you've seen Deadpool kill everyone, doing it again, I mean, what's the point? With Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe again, Marvel basically hits reset and does the same thing, but with a slightly different setup. This time, Deadpool is manipulated into going on another killing spree. He's less in control and more like a tool. And then the story just repeats the formula. Deadpool hunts heroes, outsmarts them, kills them. You've already seen it before. The creativity is still there in some moments, but with zero impact. And it doesn't stop there. You also get things like Deadpool Kills Deadpool, where Deadpool hunts alternate versions of himself across the multiverse. And even Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe one last time, this past year. At this point, it stops being a story and becomes a gimmick. The whole appeal turns into how many things can Deadpool kill this time, instead of actually trying to say anything new. The more they repeat it, the more it feels like a parody of itself, and not even in a clever way. Wade's whole identity is built on being meta, breaking the fourth wall, and messing with storytelling itself. It felt like he was stepping outside the rules, but when you keep repeating that same trick, it stops feeling special. In these sequels, the meta humor becomes expected. The he knows he's in a comic angle isn't working anymore. It's just part of the formula, and once that happens, the entire concept loses its edge. So the Deadpool Kills series is one of the clearest examples of Marvel turning a cool idea into an overused concept. The first story already did everything it needed to do. It shocked readers, delivered something unique, and left an impression. The sequels aren't completely terrible, but they exist for one simple reason: the original was popular. The Ultimate Stray. Books like Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, and The Ultimates were meant to modernize Marvel for a new generation, and it worked. These stories were bold, cinematic, and super influential. You can literally see their DNA in the MCU. But even early on, there was a clear tone. Everything had to be darker, edgier, and more realistic. That meant turning characters into more flawed, more extreme versions of themselves. At first, it was interesting, but over time, it started going too far. And by the time we got to Ultimates 3, most of the original creative vision is gone, and Marvel is clearly trying to shock readers more than tell a good story. One of the biggest issues leading into Ultimates 3 is how the Ultimate Universe handled its characters. It leaned hard into that early 2000s mindset of make everything darker to make it cool, and that led to some really questionable choices. You've got Wanda and Pietro in an incest relationship, Hulk being straight up cannibalistic and borderline predatory, Wolverine acting like a pervert, even trying something weird with a teenage Mary Jane during a body swap, and Captain America portrayed as more aggressive, nationalist, and sometimes straight up unlikable. Some of these ideas could have been interesting in moderation, but the problem is that the universe kept stacking these elements on top of each other. Instead of feeling like grounded realism, it started feeling like shock value for the sake of shock value. And Ultimates 3 takes that problem and pushes it even further. With Ultimates 3, Marvel basically handed control to Jeff Loeb at a time when sales were dropping and the original creators had mostly moved on. And the goal was clear: shake things up no matter what. The story itself revolves around a murder mystery involving Scarlet Witch, but instead of building a compelling narrative, it leans heavily into shocking twists and chaotic events. Characters act out of character. The plot feels rushed and messy, and big moments don't feel earned. It's not that the story is just dark, it's that it feels directionless. You're not watching a natural continuation of the Ultimates. You are watching a series that's trying to grab attention however it can. And Ultimates 3 directly sets up Ultimatum, which is widely considered one of the worst comic events ever. And you can already see the problems starting here: excessive deaths, extreme character changes, and a focus on destruction. Marvel basically decided to wipe the slate clean by going all in on shock value. The issue is, the Ultimate Universe had one major rule: dead is dead. So all the damage done here couldn't just be undone later. That meant characters were permanently ruined or removed, leaving future writers with very little to work with. So yeah, the first Ultimates worked because it felt like a bold, modern take on the Avengers, with strong character dynamics and cinematic storytelling. Ultimates 3 throws that away in favor of edgy writing and chaotic plotting. It just made the universe worse. Infinity Crusade. After Infinity Gauntlet became one of Marvel's biggest hits ever, they immediately followed it up with Infinity War, and then again with Infinity Crusade. Marvel turned the Infinity concept into a trilogy, almost overnight. By the time we get to Infinity Crusade, it feels like the third movie in a series that already peaked. The scale is still massive, the stakes are still universe level, and the characters are still the same cosmic heavy hitters, but the freshness is gone. You can tell Marvel is trying to recreate that same epic feeling, but it is just repeating the formula with a slightly different twist. This time, the main threat isn't Thanos, it's the Goddess, who is actually the embodiment of Adam Warlock's good side. The Goddess creates a paradise-like plan where she wants to bring peace to the universe, but only for those she considers worthy to do this. She brainwashes a huge number of Marvel heroes into becoming her followers, turning them into an army of devoted believers. The problem is, this doesn't feel as engaging. It's more abstract, less personal, and honestly, less exciting. You're not really invested in her the same way you were with the previous villains. You've also got Adam Warlock dealing with cosmic forces again, you've got a massive cast of heroes split into opposite sides again, and you've got reality level stakes again. Even the idea of different aspects of Warlock is just another variation of what we already saw before. Marvel was remixing the same elements, and when you repeat a structure too many times, it loses its impact. You can almost predict how things are going to play out, which is the exact opposite of what made Infinity Gauntlet so exciting in the first place. Yes, Infinity Crusade is still huge in terms of scale. You've got entire galaxies, cosmic beings, massive battles, all of that is still there. But the emotional weight just isn't. In Infinity Gauntlet, you had real tension, real consequences, and the villain you could actually understand. Here, everything feels more distant. The brainwashed heroes don't feel like themselves. The conflict doesn't feel as grounded, and the stakes, while technically massive, don't feel as meaningful. The story is trying to be bigger than everything that came before, but in doing so, it loses the human element that made those stories work. The comic isn't necessarily awful, it's just unnecessary. The Infinity Saga already reached its peak with Infinity Gauntlet, and even Infinity War started to show signs of repetition. By the time we get to the third installment, it's clear that Marvel is stretching the concept beyond what it needed.